What's going on, guys? My name is Caleb Spikestra. I'm a 3D designer and motion graphics artist, and today I'm going to be talking about a software called XNormal. XNormal is a software in which you can take your 3D model that is high resolution and you can bake down all of the detail into a low poly version of that model. It's a really nice software to know how to use, and it's totally free, so you can go and download it. I'll put a link down in the description for you to download. And using this software, we're going to take something that is just very unusable, or maybe not unusable, but is not practical for a large scene, and we're going to bake all the detail down into a low poly version that we can work with in a game engine, or that we could work with in a very complicated scene. So as you can see on my screen right now, I'm going to be using this Pinecone model, and I found this Pinecone model on Sketchfab. It was actually created using photogrammetry, which if you don't know what photogrammetry is, you can check out some of my previous videos where I dive into using photogrammetry and exactly how you can add that into your workflow. But for this video, I'm just going to take a pre-made model that I found, and this is by Tiny Ruin. Go over to Sketchfab and check out some of his other stuff. This person makes really nice photogrammetry models that I believe he actually uses for some of his games that he creates. So yeah, we have this model. I can go into the layers here and we can look at the wireframe and just see how complicated this really is. This is a very heavy model. For photogrammetry, it's actually not terrible. Photogrammetry can be much heavier, but even still, this isn't something that we want to clone across our scene and create hundreds of these, because this will destroy our viewport. So I'm going to just take this model and let's sort of just bake some of this detail down. I'm going to move over here to Cinema 4D. And as this loads up real quick, I just want to let you guys know that I'm going to be working on some more videos coming up soon, and I'm going to be going into sort of more of my photogrammetry process of outside photogrammetry. I'm actually doing a trip out to Salt Lake City, which I'm very excited about. And I'm going to be trying to do some photogrammetry out there and capture some of the salt flats and just some of the natural geography that's going on out there, and I'm going to do a video about that. I'm going to try and put a lot more quality into that. I've been just kind of on the side doing these videos, so hopefully I'll be able to create something really nice for that. So here's my cinema right here, and I'm going to just go in here and we're going to open a project. And I have the Pinecone right here, so let's open that up. I'm going to leave everything default. I'm just importing an XFBX. It should all be good. Alright, so here we are. Let's delete everything in our scene. We don't need any of this. And right now I don't even need a material for this. First thing I want to do is I want to flatten this out. So I'm going to first hit the center to parent button, which I have pinned right up here, and the center axis to. So this will center it. Let's center that again. Make sure we're centered in the middle. And then I'm going to go to my foreview and go to the side view, my right side view. And I'm going to go to face mode and select all the faces. Excuse me. And rotate. And the reason I'm selecting all the faces to do this is just because by doing this, I'm not actually, I'm not messing up the axis. I'm not rotating the axis, I'm rotating the model. So let's get it generally where we want it. That's looking pretty straight up and down. That's what I'm looking for there. So I'll go back into object mode and come here and then let's center again. Center that. And I actually want my axis to be on the bottom of my Pinecone. So I'm going to go into the enable axis mode and move this all the way down to the bottom here. And then when I center it, it'll drop it right on 0 there, which is where I want it. Okay. Now, the first thing that we're going to want to do here, once we have our model ready to go, is I'm going to want to create a low poly version of this model. And I want to have really nice topography for this so that our final model will be something that people can go in and edit easily. And it will just be very nice geometry. I don't want to create messy geometry, because what I could do is I can actually just take that and I can add a polygon reduction tool to it. So I'm going to search that. And we'll just add a polygon reduction here. Let's see, and I guess I want the model to be inside it. And I can choose how much I want to reduce. So you can see here, if I go into the edge mode, this will just automatically reduce our polygons. So this would be the easy way to do this. I could come in here and let's say that we want that low of detail. We're keeping the same sort of outline here, but we're bringing the detail way down. So that would be the easy way to do this, and it will probably actually give us a better result. But I want to make sure my topography is just really nice. Topology, sorry, I've been saying topography. The topology is just very nice, so I'm not going to do it this way. Let's delete that, and I'm going to duplicate my model again. And this will be my, we'll call it Pinecone low. Or sorry, this will be the high poly version, because the one that we have hidden will just be our backup. Then I'm going to take a sphere, and I want to line the sphere up to the bottom of our pinecone. And this will sort of be the cage, what we call our cage. This is what's going to project the normal map onto the low poly model. So I think right in here, it's pretty close. I'm going to add some extra segments to that. We'll go with like 20 for now. And then to edit my sphere to sort of fit around this entire pine cone, I'm going to come in here, and I'm going to create a FFD. This will parent to that sphere. Will fit to the parent. And now with this, I can add more subdivisions here. So I'm gonna go with, I'll just go with 4. And this is a cool tool because I can go into my point mode, and I'm going to make sure that I'm selecting everything, not just the visible elements. So I select through, and I'm going to select just these top points of the FFD. And as I drag them, it will actually drag our geometry with it. So this is a cool way that I can line up that sphere to sort of match our pine cone. I'm going to bring this up, bring this layer up. And as you can see, our geometry is going to be pretty nice if we do it this way. It'll keep that same level of detail, or rather that it will keep that that nice topology. So scale these down, come in the middle here. And I'm just going into my side view so I can kind of see where the cage is around the object. I might want to add more subdivisions on my FFD, but we'll see how this turns out. Bring this down, and this actually, so this needs to be moved to the right more, it looks like. And I'm just going to do one side, and it'll move to the other side and start working on that one. Pull this out. And I just want the entire pinecone to be inside here. It starts to come in here, so I'm going to pull these edges in a little bit. Okay, and I'll go to another side here. Let's see, let's come in here. Bring these sides in. This entire top can just be moved over to match that. Beautiful, beautiful. I think I need to add more subdivisions here. I don't think I have enough subdivisions on my FFD. So I'm going to do that in just a second. Yeah, let's go to 5. We'll go 5 on these. It should give me a little more detail to work with. This really needs to come out more than I was expecting. I'll grab this whole layer, and I actually want it to be more flat on bottom, so I think if I flatten this, this will give me a better bottom part here. And it's just going to be a lot of this sort of moving this around, getting your sphere object exactly as close as you can to sort of matching that pine cone without messing up our topology. I'm just going to keep pulling these points around until I feel happy with where I'm at. Yeah, so that seems to be covering it pretty well from that side. I can kind of look at it from the top here. And I might actually just come into my perspective and sort of bring in, I think these edges need to actually be brought in. Since this isn't really a square. Let's see. Yeah, so once I see that start to pop through, that's when I want to stop moving. Okay. I think some of these edges need to be brought in. Oh, hold up 1 second. All right, I'm going to pause this real quick. All right, and yeah, we're just gonna keep moving these points around. Come in here, grab some of these edges. Let's see. Looks like we got some popping out here, so I want to actually pull this side out more. I'm just gonna grab these outside edges here. And we're getting pretty close here, it looks like. Still got a little bit more on this side. All right. I think I want to actually bring this edge in here. So it kind of goes in a little bit. Maybe these points. Yeah, it's just a lot of kind of these adjustments, sort of getting it as close as we can to matching up with the pine cone. Something I don't like is I don't like how tall it is on top here. I think this can come down, and now I'm probably gonna have to pull this side out some. All right, we got a few more things popping through here. And we're just trying to get most of this inside our cage. If anything is still kind of showing through the cage, we'll actually end up not getting any normal information when we do our bake from that. So we want to make sure we're getting as much of it inside the cage as possible. Bring this side out. Bring this up. There we go. Okay. That point's way too high there. All Alright, and then I'll come into my side view here and just make sure everything is pretty close. I do think this side can come in more. And this side can definitely come in more. Just gotta pull this edge out. Okay. And yeah, it's just a whole bunch of this kind of finagling it. Alright. Looks like I messed up this edge. Alright. I think that's pretty close. We might have a little popping through, but I think it's definitely close enough. It doesn't need to be perfect here. Okay, so I'm going to name this our cage. Bring that to the top here, and then I'm just going to current state this so that we don't have that FFD in there anymore, and hide the old one so we'll keep that information. And this, actually, let's call it the Pinecone cage. So this is sort of our geometry that's going to be figuring out how to project the high poly Pinecone model to the low poly Pinecone model. I'm going to actually just copy my Pinecone cage here, and we're going to make this our low. And for the low poly one, we're actually going to want to have the geometry inside of, or for the most part, inside of the Pinecone. And for this is actually easy. Once we have our cage created, I'm going to hit Command A to select all polygons in polygon mode. And I'm going to go into the mesh and into move. And under move, we have normal scale. And by scaling in now, it's actually going to scale all of our polygons together inward on the normal direction. Let's hide the cage so we can see what we're doing here. And I want it to sort of come inside of our Pinecone. And I can go to the side view to see what we got. I might actually scale up a little bit so I can fill in some of that space. And this will also maybe take a little bit of just sort of moving points around to get it right where we're looking for. As you can see, we got a lot popping up through here, and I'm not feeling that. I don't want that. An easy way to do this without creating another FFD would be to just sort of select some of those points that we want to move over and change our mode, selection mode, to soft select. And with this, it will move everything around it. So we won't get just this like hard movement of just those points. It'll slightly move the points around it as well. Look at that. We can kind of get this stuff all moved in. I want to make sure I'm on only select visible elements, so I'm not selecting points on the other side. And this is getting pretty close to where I want it. I can actually bring my radius down so it won't be affecting quite as many points, because we're affecting some of the points on the other side now, and I don't want that. And as I bring all of this in, now we are basically where we want this. If I go into the side view and I select my low poly, I can see where I'm at here, and it looks like everything is nicely inside, contained inside of the Pinecone, and it's filling that space pretty well. So this is going to be what our model actually is in terms of the geometry. It's going to be really nice and low poly, and hopefully we're going to get most of this geometry detail on our high poly model. The next thing that I want to do is I'm going to want to UV unwrap this low poly model. So I'm going to hide everything else and select that low poly. And I'm going to go into my startup user, And let's go into the BP UV edit window. And from here, this is what our UV texture editor looks like right now. And it's not very clean. It's not exactly what we're looking for. So let's edit this and make it just a nice UV map. For this, what I want to do is I'm going to create a seam down the side. So let's go into point mode. And I'm just going to select some of these points here. Oh, let's turn off the soft selection tool. Go to normal, and I'm going to select a seam down the side of my Pinecone that I want to cut. And I'm going to delete my original UV because I don't like the way that it's UVing right now. And I'm going to select all the way down right here. And I'm going to go to UV unwrap. And see that? It unwraps it right along that seam that I selected. What I can do to make sure that this is actually working the way that I want it to, that it's actually a good UV, is I can go into the texture and the UV map, and this will show me how it's being UV'd. And I can actually, over here in the UV settings, we can look for distortion. And you can see it's distorting actually pretty bad right along there. So I might want to sort of free that up a little bit. And to do that, I'm actually going to create a loop cut down here on the bottom. And let's just go UL so we can select the whole loop. Select that. And I don't want to totally cut it. I want to keep the pieces together. So I'm going to unselect just one point there. And then we're going to hit the UV peeler tool. Oh, sorry, that's not the tool I wanted. I wanted to do the just UV unwrap again. And now this is what we have, and we're getting hardly any distortion. This is actually working pretty well. So the next thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to relax it. So in the Relax UV tab under the UV settings here, I'm going to apply a relax, and there's two different settings here. I usually use the LSCM setting, and that'll sort of relax that a little bit. And then I'm going to go into the UV packing tab, and I'm just going to hit apply. And it looks like we're actually, let's see, I think texture space, yeah. Okay, so it looks like this is basically, it's already optimized our packing here. I might actually finish the loop cut here because this will free up a lot of UV space. See, look at that. So when I pack it, after I cut that whole thing, now I've got a nice freed up space. And this is what our UVs look like. And there's hardly any distortion. We got a little bit going on up here, but I think that it will be okay. It's not going to be too bad on the distortion. So let's go back into our startup view. And there is something that I forgot. So our UVs have to be identical between the low poly version and the cage. If you don't do that, then it will not project correctly. So this is very important. And I did not do this. I should have UV'd the cage before creating our Pinecone low model. So I'm actually just going to delete the old cage, or I will keep the cage actually for reference. But I'm going to duplicate my Pinecone low, and we're going to make this our cage again. And then I'm going to unhide that original one just so I can see where my goal is. And we'll do the same thing, but we're going to scale up this time. So I'm going to select the Pinecone cage, hit Command A to select all faces. And then I'm going to go into the mesh, move, and normal scale. And let's scale all of this up to match. And remember, I scaled it up, so now I need to scale this down for the cage to match up my other geometry. And it looks like I need to go bring it a little bit. And yeah, and I moved some of those points around, so I'm going to go back in there and fix that. And this, normally you wouldn't have to do this if you had done it right the first time, but I did not do this right. So I got to sort of fix my mistake here. I got my soft select. I'm going to bring let's see, I'm going to bring my radius up first of all. Pull some of this over. Bring these back in. I want to sort of get as close as I can to matching my original cage. And if it's a little outside of that, that's okay. I just don't want it to be too small because I need my Pinecone to fit inside of that cage. And we had gotten it pretty snug before. So keep moving these points to match that up. Pulling it out and up some. And I think we're pretty close. That's pretty close. So I'm going to delete my old cage. And just to make sure that we have this in the right spot, I want to unhide my high poly and make sure everything is inside the cage. Looks like I need to bring this over because I got a little bit showing through right there. Pull this out. Okay. Oh, yeah, this side needs some fixing. Cool. So now our cage and our low poly Pinecone will have the same UVs because we just duplicated the UVs after we set them up the way that we wanted them. And I think at this point, we are ready to start exporting all of our different models, and then we can go into XNormal and we can do our baking, which is kind of what this video is all about. So I'm going to start with my Pinecone high. And let's see, what do we got going on here? Okay, that was weird. So I had a bunch of floating points from when I was editing. So to get rid of those, I just hit Command A to select all points on the model, and I hit UO, and that optimizes those points and removes them. I think that was from the original model. Those were just some leftover points that that our model had in it. So that shouldn't have been there. So yeah, and I'm going to select my Pinecone high. And I'm going to go into File, Export, and let's export as FBX. I tried with several different formats, and I found that FBX does the best job of keeping all the information in the model that we want for XNormal. So it just tends to work the best with the software. So let's export as FBX, and I believe I just want to leave everything the same. We don't want to have any animations, obviously, and if there's anything else, if there's some cameras in your scene, we don't want those. The main thing that we want to make sure that we do is we want to only export selected, so I have selection only checked, and I think by default that should not be checked. And we also want to have triangulate on because XNormal requires your models to be triangulated in order for it to bake correctly. And I found that out the hard way. I tried it several times when I first got the software, and I couldn't figure out what was wrong, and it was because I wasn't triangulating my geometry. So we'll triangulate, we'll do selection only, and everything else should remain default. And I'm going to hit OK and find a place to put that. I'm just going to put it in my folder here, and I'm going to call that Pinecone high, and this will help me remember that this is the high poly version. And we'll do the same thing with our low. So I'm going to export FBX, selection only, and triangulate are selected. Okay. And this will be our Pinecone low. Save that. And then we want to save our Pinecone cage. Again, export FBX and selection only. Everything looks correct. And this will be our cage. Okay, so we have all of our models exported from Cinema, and we can now move into XNormal. So I'm going to come over and open this up. And again, this is a free software, so I think it is just such a good tool to use in optimizing your scenes and optimizing your assets, and you don't even have to pay for it. There's probably a better workflow in ZBrush, and I can kind of talk about that some other time. I may do a video on my ZBrush workflow, but you have to pay for ZBrush, and ZBrush can be expensive, and sometimes you just don't want to be paying for all these different software. So I found that this is a really good free option for optimizing and baking your models. It has, you can see it definitely looks free. It's the UI is very outdated. It doesn't look the best, but it works. And I find that sometimes the software that look like this actually work the best. So let's go in here, and I've got something that I was sort of testing before, but I'm going to clear out all meshes on my high definition meshes and my low definition meshes. And under the high definition mesh, we're going to right click and we want to add a mesh. So I'm going to select there, and I'm going to come into my exported geometry, and I'm going to select my Pinecone high. And then I'm going to go into my low definition meshes and do the same thing, right click to add meshes. And I'm going to add my Pinecone low. And then we want to, there's no option over here for adding a cage. And that's because we're actually going to want to add that underneath our high definition. So if I come into the high definition meshes, I'm going to come over here and, or sorry, maybe it's under the low. Yes, okay. I was wrong. It's under the low definition meshes. If you come into the low definition meshes and you scroll over and you find the external cage file, this is where we want to put our cage. So I'm going to right click on that square, and I'm going to browse external cage files. Don't add a mesh. You want to browse external cage files. And then we're going to add that, we're going to add our Pinecone cage. And we're going to get this notification that's basically telling us that it has to have the same topology, which we do have because we use the same model. And that also applies to the UVs. That's what I've been stressing. If you don't have the same topology and UVs that your low poly mesh has, then it will not work. It will give you very weird results. Trust me, I've had a lot of trial and error on this. So we'll add that in. And the last thing we want to do before we start exporting, or before we start baking, is we want to go back into our high definition meshes. And I want to get my base texture, because by doing this, we're going to have totally different UVs than the original. And the original one, usually when you're doing photogrammetry, it is just super messy. The UVs are going to be all over the place. It doesn't do a very good job of UVing your mesh. So with this, we're going to have that clean UV that we created with our low poly Pinecone. And if we want to get the diffuse texture transferred over to those new UVs, we need to add it here. So for this, I want to choose the base texture that I'm baking. So I'm going to add a base texture by right-clicking on that block and click on the base texture to bake. And then let's choose the texture from that file that we exported, or that we downloaded with our 3D model. And this is something that probably won't happen to you, but it happened to me. It has to be a .jpeg file. If it's not, then it will not even show up here. I'll show you real quick. If I go into our folder here, we have our textures, and the textures, it seems like they should work. This is a JPEG, but if I look at the properties, it's actually a .jpeg and not a .jpg, and it needs to be a .jpg, otherwise it will not work. So what you can do is you can basically just resave it as one of those, as a file with that extension. You could bring it into Photoshop or some sort of photo software and just export it again with the correct extension. But I actually already have done this, so I'm just going to grab the one that I've already done, which I have in here. And as you can see right here, this is what it is. So I'll grab that texture. And I believe everything should remain the same along this area. And everything there looks good. We don't want to offset anything. So now we're going to go into the baking options. And here we can choose what exactly we want to bake. if all we're looking for is a normal map, then we can just select the normal map here. We don't have to select anything else. But what I like to bake out is I like to get my height map, because with our Pinecone, we have a lot of sort of that detail in there that we want to make sure we get. So I'm going to get some of that height map, and then the normal map will give us some of that, the smaller detail. And I also want to get the base texture, because with the base texture, we'll be able to add it to our new UVs. And you can get the ambient occlusion if you're looking for that. That can be helpful for de-lighting your texture, or it can just be something you add in the end. But I'm just going to get the 3 for now. And under here, I did actually have a problem with this. So under the settings for your normal map, you want to make sure that it's tangent space. If it's not tangent space, you're going to get really weird, and well, you're going to get really weird normals, and it is something that you can do. There is a workflow with tangents, with non-tangent space normals, but I don't work in that. Most people don't, so I would make sure that tangent space is selected, and everything else here should be the same. And for the height map, we can make it interactive. That seems to be the best. I haven't actually messed with the other settings, but it works right there. And yeah, the other thing here is with the base texture, if it's not working, it's going to show up red. So if it's showing up red and you're confused why you're getting just a solid red texture, that's why. It's because you have this selected, and that's basically saying that it wasn't able to get the information it was looking for, so it just fills it in red. So that's just something that's good to know. And I believe everything else is good. The XNormal, before I run this, XNormal has a lot of other settings here, a lot of different things you can do. Another tool that I really like under the Tools tab is a height map to normal. This can be a really cool and really helpful tool to use, because you can basically create a height map just by grabbing a photograph, making it black and white in Photoshop, and sort of messing with the levels and creating your custom height map from a photograph, and then you can turn it into a normal map that you can actually use. So that can be a really helpful tool, but there's a lot of other things you can mess around with here that can be pretty nice. But let's go back into the baking options. Before we generate our maps, we're going to choose the location. So I want to actually change this back to my desktop. And this is where we're working, so I'm going to just drop it right in here. And I'll choose a file name. We'll call this new Pinecone. And save that. And then we can choose the resolution. And I believe my first resolution was 4K, so let's just do 4K again. Get some high detail in there. And you can kind of mess with these values. I sort of leave them the same. Anti-aliasing will kind of give you more sharpness on your normal map, but I just leave that the same as well. And from here, I can hit Generate Maps. And hopefully, if we did everything correct, which may not have worked, it should output all of our maps the way that we want them to be. Okay, it's looking pretty close. There's definitely a little bit of things happening here that we're not wanting. And then it's going to create our height map. And I believe it should give me the option to sort of edit my the toning on my height map. And the higher resolution textures you choose, the longer this process will take. So because we chose 4K, it's going to take a little bit longer, but it'll give us some better results. And in here, I can kind of mess with the values here. This is like changing our levels. So we can make it a more extreme height map if we pull these values in. And this is basically choosing at what point it hits white, the max point for the white and the max point for black. And I like to bring it in a little bit, especially with our Pinecone, because it does have some pretty strong displacement. But I don't want to go too high, because we can always edit this. We can change these values later in Octane if we're using, or whatever render engine we're using. And I'm liking that, so you'll just hit exit when it's at a point you're looking for. Okay, and it'll finish up that pass. And look at that, it's using those nice UVs. And we're even getting our diffuse on the UVs that we created, which is awesome because now we've got these really nice UVs set up and we're going to have really good topology. So you are going to notice there's a few holes in our geometry and a few holes, like right in here we got some holes showing up, especially in our normal. And that's because I didn't totally fix the cage. I think the cage had a few pieces of geometry popping out through it. So that's why we're getting those little spots there that aren't working super well. And it is going to be kind of messy on the bottom here. I don't know how well this will line up, but we can bring this into Cinema. We'll go back and now let's just apply it to our low poly. So I'm going to hide everything else. And I'm just going to create a material and apply it to my low poly. And in here, I'm going to select the color and load an image. And we want to grab the new ones that we created, which are on my desktop. So first, I want to get my base texture. And look at that. That's actually working very well. Much better than I was expecting it to work. I'm going to remove the reflection so you can see what's happening. Yeah, that mapped really well. I'm happy with this. And then I'm going to add a normal. And we'll add that new normal map that we created. And hopefully this will generate what we're looking for. And the last thing we want to do is we want to add, so we're going to add a displacement. This is normally where you're going to add that height map. So we'll add that height. The one problem that we're going to have is just purely the, when you're using just standard materials in Cinema 4D, and I don't know if this is the same in other software, but it actually the height map affects the geometry, so it's going to pull points out and in. And because it's such a low poly model, it's not gonna work. This height map is going to make it look really weird. But you can see in our preview here what it actually looks like, and it looks like it's doing what we want it to do. You can always bring that strength down some so it's not popping out quite as much. And this is basically how I do it. This is how I take a model that's this high of resolution. Let's put them side by side. And actually, let's just create another material here so we can see what we're working with. I'm going to add, oh, not what I wanted. I'm going to add my original texture. And make it viewable. Yeah, so you can see this is our original and this is our new one. And it doesn't look quite right just because we don't have that displacement happening. But if you look at the amount of geometry that's showing, this one has so much geometry and this is so low. We'll be getting pretty similar, when we do some rendering, we'll be getting really similar output. And we're just getting all this detail in a low poly thing, and our UVs are just beautifully laid out. They're so nice, and we're not having these crazy UVs. I can show you actually what the UVs look like on this photogrammetry model, and I can guarantee you they're going to be messy. I want to go to BP edit. Yeah, so I mean, you can see right here how it's being laid, how it's being UV'd, and it's not horrible, but it's just messy. You've got these islands all over. The cuts don't make a lot of sense. You've kind of got some like weird islands happening right here. It's not very clean. There's a lot of distortion happening up at the top. So we've been able to take this and make it just a much nicer model. So yeah, that's pretty much my entire XNormal workflow. You can see just how powerful it can be, and it's a totally free software. So it just does a lot for something that's free, and it doesn't take that much work. If you really want to optimize your scene or optimize some of the assets in your scene, you can just do this process and it will make it really nice. Or if you want to have just topology is significantly different. We're getting a ton of polygons on the left model here, but our right model is just super optimized. There's hardly any polygons going on. This is going to be very light on our scene, and we're getting the same results. It's amazing. I'm very happy with how these turned out. You can see I have my two materials, and it's simple. It's just applying our new texture here, and we're adding our displacement map, and we can change how much it's displacing that pine cone, and then we're adding the new normal map that we created. And that's everything right there. That's all we're using to create this really nice look for our pine cones. Also, our UVs are just really nice. We have those beautifully done UVs. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching this. I really appreciate you guys watching my videos, and I hope that you're actually getting something out of this. And I'm really excited. I'm going to have some cool content coming up soon, so be on the lookout for that. And if you know anyone that might be interested in this content that I'm creating, just refer them over here. I'd love to have more people just kind of seeing what I'm doing and just learning with me. So thank you guys, and I hope that I'll see you all next week. Have a good week.